Mousepi for Hire is not just the art style, because after running on wall during shootouts, the game sending me to hell and giving me finger guns, it made me wonder why more shooters should stop being this creative.
You rocked the boat too hard. This is where you fall down.
What a crappy
Line!
The first thing you'll notice in Mousepi for Hire is obviously the art style. The black and white visuals straight out of the 1930s cartoon are the entire reason the game got my attention in the first place. The second you see the animation mixed with that old film grain effect, you already know if the game is for you or not. And for me though, it made it stand out immediately because games this creative barely exist anymore. Shooters nowadays are these non-stop military explosions when you get someone screaming on your headset every 5 seconds. And after the last Call of Duty we got, I mean, come on, what are we even doing here? Meanwhile, Mousepi stands out the second you load up the game, and from beginning to end, I am glad I stuck with this one all the way through. So let's go ahead and talk Mousepi for Hire. Okay, now, obviously the art style is doing a lot of the heavy lifting early on. The game is fully hand-drawn from beginning to end, and the amount of work packed into the animation constantly shows what you're playing. The whole 1930s noir detective cartoon mixed with the FPS gameplay is one of those concepts that sells itself the second you hear it. And look, I'm probably not gonna be the first person or the last one to compare the game to Cuphead, but come on man, the art style in Cuphead was incredible when that game released. Completely different genre of course, but you can absolutely feel the same appreciation for old school animation here. The difference is, eventually the gameplay has to carry its own weight too, and for me, Mouse actually pulls that off. The second the combat starts, the game immediately gave me that old school Doom mixed with the Wolfenstein vibes, because you're constantly moving through levels searching for armor, weapons, secrets, collectibles, and whatever helps you survive the next fight. The formula is not something we have never seen before, but the way in which Mousepi does it, after a few hours it just started feeling like the shooter I wanted to keep playing all the way through. And the movement, the music, the weapons, the animation work, after a while it all starts blending together into this really satisfying rhythm. And the weapons themselves help a lot because the game fully commits to the cartoon insanity instead of just playing things safe. Like, come on, one of the best weapons in the game is this Tommy gun style weapon called the James gun, which of course put a smile on my face the second I saw that. And every time I thought the game finally ran out of weird ideas, it would just throw something else at me. On the game you get shotguns, cannons, dynamite, and just ridiculous weapons that fit the world perfectly. For example, you get the Vanisher literally melting enemies into skeletons. And then you get the Jarhead, which straight up explodes enemies' heads every time you use it. I'll be honest with you, I barely touch it later on because weapons like the James gun and the shotgun just felt stronger during tougher encounters. But the fact the game even commits to ideas this dumb is what makes the entire thing memorable. And something I really like is how the game is trying to keep things fresh instead of just giving you the same weapon over and over. Look, you get a lot of weapons in the game that you could definitely mix and match, but if you don't want to use any of them, just bare knuckle everybody into the ground. And then later into the game, they start introducing even more mechanics on top of that. For example, they got a Popeye style spinach power up that basically turns Jack Pepper into a menace because you can just punch the living lights out of everybody around you. And not just that, you get finger guns that literally let you shoot enemies with your hands like some type of cartoon gag. And you even get a power-up where Jack straight up eats a pepper and suddenly your bullets start incinerating enemies. That is something I can definitely praise about the game. It's full of this 1900 type chaos, never taking itself too seriously. And every time you think you've seen everything, the game just keeps throwing another mechanic, another weapon, or another gimmick on the level that keeps the formula fresh. And once the movement upgrades start opening up, the gameplay gets even better. For example, you get the double jump and the tail spin for longer and more precise platforming. And especially the wall running start changing how you approach combat entirely. You'll stop treating arenas like simple shooting galleries and just start flying through fights way more aggressively. Like you're gonna start bouncing around attacks, reaching hidden areas, and finding secrets the game clearly expects you to miss the first time around if you're not experimenting with the movement system. And that's when I stopped thinking so much about the art style and started getting pulled into the combat itself. Because art style aside, the game really feels good to play. And for me though, the game kept introducing enough charm, weapons, creative boss fights, and fun level design that I still wanted to keep pushing forward. And even when I got comfortable with the formula, I still wanted to see what strange thing the game was gonna throw at me next. But gameplay and style can only take a game so far too. Eventually the story has to give you a reason to keep pushing deeper into Mouseburg.
that this case was more trouble than it was worth. But, well, trouble is what I do.
You play as Jack Pepper, a private investigator working on a case of a missing magician called the Magnificent Bando, someone that actually served with Jack during the war. What starts as a missing person case slowly spirals into digging deeper into the city that's filled with corrupt cops, gangs, crooked politicians, shady experiments, and probably the last group of people I will trust with literally anything. And I also gotta give credit to Troy Baker as Jack Pepper because his voice fits the world perfectly. The second he starts talking, he immediately sounds like somebody that belongs into this creamy noir detective city. And you get the sarcasm, delivery, and the old school private investigator energy. All of it fits the tone of the game really well. The city itself constantly has this dark fitting atmosphere hanging all over it, but somehow it still works perfectly alongside the cartoon violence happening around you. Even just walking across the street kept me engaged because there was almost always something weird or interesting to look at. And I also like how the game handles moving between locations too, because instead of just throwing you into another mission immediately, you actually drive through the city with this overhead map of Mouseburg. And what's cool about it is that it lays everything out almost like an old detective board game. And it's visually stunning too because every district has its own identity, and it helps the city feel bigger than just disconnected levels. And the game itself is not just one wave of enemies after another. It actually slows things down between missions by bringing you back into Jack's private office, where you can interact with the investigation board, look over clues, and slowly piece together what's happening in Mouseburg. It works as both a recap of the story so far and a setup for whatever disaster you're about to walk into next. And the area outside the office gives you a lot of personality too. You can head up to the bar, interact with NPCs, mess around the baseball card minigame, restock supplies, and upgrade your weapons before heading back out again. The baseball card game itself did not completely hook me up personally, but little things like that helps Mouseburg feel alive outside of combat. And I also like that the game lets you upgrade a lot of the weapons because honestly some of them can feel a little weak early on before you start dumping schematics into them. But once you start upgrading them more, especially around tier 3, some of those same weapons start feeling way better to use and way more powerful too. And it made me want to stick with certain guns longer instead of just constantly replacing everything every mission. The black and white art style could have definitely become gimmicky after a while, but the amount of detail packed into the enemies, the environments, facial expressions, and the animation work, all of it constantly keeps the world feeling alive. And to tie everything together, the soundtrack in this game is beautiful. The jazzy soundtrack gives the whole experience this feeling that perfectly matches the atmosphere. For example, during exploration, you get the quiet, jazzy feeling, but as soon as you walk into combat, the jazz soundtrack suddenly explodes while the screen turns into complete chaos. And come on man, you cannot tell me some of these tracks don't sound like they came straight out of Cowboy Bebop. Just that, but I think the boss fights are where Mouse fully embraces how insane some of these ideas actually are, going into old school cartoon chaos in the best way possible. For example, like when you fight the third wife, in this fight you're literally fighting a ghost. So you cannot just shoot your way through encounters normally, you actually have to pull out your flashlight Luigi's Mansion style before you can start bringing in the pain. Another example is this one, Robo Betty. It's like a multi-phase fight where you're constantly dodging attacks, avoiding lasers, and using the environment to survive so the entire screen turns into madness. And the journey to the fights help the game a lot too because the levels themselves constantly keep changing things up. Like one minute you're running through an opera house, then suddenly you're underwater shooting enemies, jumping between planes mid-air, and eventually the game basically sending you to hell. Like I don't care how much this job is paying, man, you cannot pay me enough to be this dedicated. And I think that constant escalation is a huge reason why the game stayed fresh for me longer than I expected. And in my opinion, the difficulty is also very well balanced overall. Like if you want to crank up the difficulty, the game absolutely starts punishing mistakes harder, especially during some of the later fights. But Detective Mode, which is basically normal difficulty, will feel like the sweet spot for most players. And look, you can actually play the game in Rookie Mode, there's no shame in that, but it can be a little forgiving early on. But even there, some boss fights can destroy you if you stop paying attention for too long. There were definitely moments later where enemy encounters started blending together more than I wanted. And you will definitely start noticing the repetitious gameplay a little bit more clearly. And I also ran into a lot of frustrating bugs during my playthrough too, especially one section where enemies completely failed to spawn correctly during combat, like the combat music was playing in the background, but there was no enemies showing up at all, which forced me to restart the entire chapter just so I was able to progress. And one thing I do wish the game actually handled better is letting you revisit previous areas later on, because once you leave certain locations, the game completely locks you out of going back. So if you're trying to 100% the game or collect everything, make sure you finish whatever you need to before moving on, because some collectibles and secrets become permanently missable after certain points. And if by any chance you're a completionist, I will strongly suggest you follow like a guide of some sort, because the game feels like it does not want to be fully completed. And the story itself can lose a little momentum during middle portions of the game too, especially when the mystery slows down for a while. But even during the slower sections, the atmosphere never stopped carrying the experience for me. And the soundtrack, the movement, the animation work, the weird weapons, the boss fights, the noir detective vibes, the cheesy jokes, all of it keeps the game from ever losing its personality, and honestly, I miss that feeling in a lot of shooters. Nowadays, when people think about shooter games, they think about Call of Duty or Battlefield. But then you got games like mousepi just doing something completely different, just going through shootouts, punching enemies, blasting people with finger guns. And if you combine that with the atmosphere, the movement, the weird weapons, and the boss fights, and just how committed the game is to its own identity, Mouse ended up becoming one of the most refreshing shooters I played in a long time, full of personality. And no spoilers, but judging how the game ends, this is probably not the last time we see Jack Pepper in action. The ending definitely teases that there's more work to be done around Mouseburg, like more cases, more loose ends, and weird nonsense waiting somewhere in the city. So I don't know what they're planning, either a DLC or a full sequel later on, but whatever it is, I'm completely on board for whatever adventure Jack Pepper gets dragged into next. So no, I don't think Mouse is just a Cuphead shooter like a lot of people are saying. That comparison is probably gonna get a lot of people interested in the game in the first place, sure, but after finishing it, the thing that I actually remember is the experience itself. And yeah, I actually loaded the game up because of the art style first, but by the end, I was not even thinking about that anymore. And honestly, I am really glad I gave this game a chance, because it was a fun game from beginning to end. And the game itself took me about 15 to 20 hours because I was messing around Mouseburg and getting some collectibles. But if you're going by the story by itself, it's probably gonna take you somewhere between 8 to 10 hours, maybe 12 if you take your time. And the love and care they put into this game is just beautiful. I mean, everything is hand-drawn from beginning to end, and you can actually see the love and care they put into the game. And for that $30 price tag, it is worth every penny if you're really thinking about picking it up. So let me ask you this, would you rather play something weird and creative like this nowadays, or do you still prefer the AAA blockbuster style shooters? And if you already played the game, what do you think about it? Let me know in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for sticking around. If you want more videos like this, like and subscribe. Have a fantastic night, and I'll catch you on the next one.